I want to make some changes to this beautiful dresser, so if you want to see what I have in mind, stick around. Hello everyone, welcome back to Sab's Rehabs. This is a Stanley French Provincial style dresser I found at an estate sale. It's been sitting in my shed for a while trying to figure out what to do with it because it is absolutely beautiful. It is missing some handles here, but that's a super easy fix. This piece has amazing bones. It is beautiful. The only issue is that orange color. I start this flip by removing the hardware and disassembling the piece. So I do go ahead and take all the drawers out, and that was a little bit of work because there are 9 drawers on this piece. Next, I grab my 50-50 mixture of vinegar, it's white distilled vinegar and water, spray a liberal amount on the surface, use an old kitchen sponge to scrub it, and wipe up the excess and come back with a clean cloth and rinse it. When the surface was dry, it is time to start sanding. So I start by gently sanding the surface just to kind of see what I'm working with so I can get a game plan here. I'm using some 220 grit sandpaper and I smooth out some scratches, feather them out so they're not quite so bold, and I go over the entire surface thinking about how and what I want to do to this piece. Now this piece is the French Provincial style, so there are a lot of details, a lot of curves, a lot of edges, and my Surf Prep sander with the sanding pads come in very handy for that job. After all that sanding, I do wipe the dust away with a damp lint-free cloth. It was during all that sanding that I came up with the game plan that I want to do with this piece. Now, Stanley did a really good job actually making it seem like this is a solid wood piece because it is super heavy, and they added veneer to the back to cover the fact that this is a particle board piece with very thin veneer over it. It's not a priceless antique, so I decide I'm going to paint it. The whore. I know so many people are anti-painting, but this piece turns out so amazing. I hope that you stick around and let's see if I can change your mind. Now, painting cabinet doors can be a hassle, so here is my trick. I drill a tiny hole in the bottom of the cabinet drawer and add a very tiny key eye hook into that hole, screw it until it's tight, and then I grab an S hook and thread it through that key eye hole. And that just makes it easier to hang up this piece, and I hang it up on my garage door lining, and then that way I can paint the front and the back at the same time, and that saves me time in flipping furniture. I typically like to spray my paint with my drawers in, so to protect the inside of the drawers from getting overspray, as well as the side of the drawers, I use some painter's tape and tape across and the sides. Once I get all the taping done, which it took me only about 5 minutes, so not much time, this piece is set up and it is ready to start spraying some paint. Okay, time for priming. So I know I scuff sand the entire surface to prep for painting, but there were a few scratches. You can see where I feathered them out and I sanded it down to the veneer, and those spots can really bleed through, bring that orangey stain through my paint. So to be extra cautious, since I want to sell this piece, I want to go ahead and prime it. I do 2 coats of Kills primer in gray, letting it dry a few hours in between each coat. Now I'm a shorty, so I had to stand on a step ladder for this part, but you can see how hanging up the cabinet doors just makes it easy peasy to get those painted. All right, my paint choice is called Norwegian Blue by Bear, and I got it in the Glidden paint just because I am trying to save money. I don't know how things are locally to you, but prices just seem to be outrageous, and they've been outrageous for a while, and they're not getting any better. So I did go with a cheaper brand of paint because I have a lot of things in store for this piece, and a beautiful paint color adds to it, but it's not the catch-all for it to like draw your eye in. So I did go with a cheaper brand of paint for just this piece. I sprayed 2 coats of the Norwegian blue, letting it dry a couple hours in between each coat. Watching a piece get some new color or new paint is always my favorite part of furniture flipping videos. So here's a few moments of watching this piece transform. After the paint dried for a few hours, I went back over the surface with a 400 grit sanding sponge and then wiped the dust away. Okay, so if any of you anti-painters are still with me, I'm sure you're like, oh great, she took a beautiful piece of furniture and she painted it a new color. But wait, there's more. I do a lot more to make this piece a custom, one-of-a-kind, beautiful piece. I'm going to powder glaze this piece next. Now, paint is very porous and it absorbs kind of what you put on top of it. So if you've ever used a dark wax, you can notice that it will kind of change the color of your paint a little bit. I want that to happen some, but not too much. So I'm spraying a layer of water-based polyurethane to put a layer in between my satin paint and the powder glaze, which is the next step. Now I let that paint dry for 24 hours and then now I'm to the powder glaze. Now this is an old can, so it doesn't look like this anymore. I'll pop up a little picture of what the can looks like now, but I'm going to add black powder glaze over that Norwegian blue. You can see powder glaze is very liquidy, so you do not need to water this down. Now on this part, you could technically brush on your powder glaze. I prefer spraying it though because it makes it have a more professional and kind of even look throughout the piece. Now, powder glaze isn't anything new. There is a fantastic furniture artist out there named Amy Murray who is the queen of this. She does absolutely beautiful, stunning pieces of furniture. So I learned most of my information from her. Ethan Allen is what powder glaze was created for. So if you see the wood pieces of furniture that are Ethan Allen that have that dark in the details, that is powder glaze. And this is the really scary part, is covering up your beautiful painted piece with this black powder glaze. Now it doesn't normally spot up like it is here. I used a gloss polyurethane, so I think that's why it's kind of spotting up, but that fixes itself because I do 2 coats of this powder glaze and you let it dry a couple hours in between each coat. Now you saw how liquidy this was in the can, so tip of advice, when you're adding your powder coat layers, make sure that you do 2 thin layers because it will run just like paint, if anything more so than paint, because it seems thinner to me than paint. So I do 2 full coats and you can just see how easy and quick it is. And then you want to let this set for at least 24 hours, if not longer. So I'm excited to finally be using this powder glaze because Amy Murray is my mentor in this. I've been watching her stuff for a few years now. And I have my gun because of her, and it's all because I wanted to finally do this powder glaze. So after years of spraying, I finally am getting into the powder glaze, which is why I got all this stuff to begin with. Now, after you let it set for a few days, you can definitely tell that the powder glaze is dry because it is a light gray instead of black, but don't worry, it will darken up. And then these are Merlon pads, and they're pretty good size, so I do take them and cut them into halves or quarters to basically knock back the powder glaze. So I kind of just started in a test area to see how much of the blue is going to show, how much did it change the color, and you can see the beautiful gray blue and then kind of the black in the details. I decide that I do like that, so I want to go ahead and continue with that method. Now, when you're knocking the powder glaze off, there is a little bit of trick to it. You want to keep your fingers together. So if you have your fingers spread on your pad, you're going to get finger line marks and you won't be sanding the powder glaze off evenly. Also, whenever you're pressing into your fingers, you want to try to use even pressure throughout your fingers, just so you remove that powder glaze off as evenly as possible. But you can see here how I'm knocking off the powder glaze, revealing that Norwegian blue, but leaving the powder glaze in the details. And then after I get the lower half, you can just see the difference it makes knocking that powder glaze back. Now for the top, you kind of have to work in section because this is a 74-inch long dresser. So it is a very long dresser and I can't do one big long swipe after another. This was a massive shoulder workout, but it ends up being totally worth it because the results was stunning. So I start in the middle and work my way out to the edges. And you can see I have my feather duster in my hand, so I knock some of the powder glaze back. And then you get to where you can't see your work, so you have to have either an air nozzle or a feather duster to knock it back. And then I had to go over this 3 times with multiple different Merlon pads to knock back to the level. And I'm just trying to make the top of the dresser match the body of the dresser. Obviously not exact because this is kind of more of a grungy look, but trying to get it as fluid as possible. Also, a little side note, if you have plans to go somewhere, make sure you allow time for a shower because this powder glaze goes everywhere whenever you sand it off. Now, after sanding, there's all this loose powder glaze, so I do use an air nozzle to blow off a lot of that powder glaze and then come back with a cloth. I'm not using any pressure here, just very lightly swiping the cloth off so I can get the remaining loose powder glaze that isn't attached to the dresser that I want to stay. All right, next we need to seal in that powder glaze. So I have that water-based polyurethane in the gloss finish, and you can see as I apply it here how it starts to darken up that powder glaze. Now for the very first coat, I am going very fast and doing a light misting. You don't want to get it too thick for the first coat because that is powder. It will pull up and it will run and make black drips down your piece. So very, very light first coat. And then I come back in with a second and third coat and add a much thicker layer of the polyurethane. Again, being careful so it doesn't run because no one wants to deal with drips on a nice fancy piece. But you can see after 3 layers of poly that powder glaze really darkened up and just adds so much depth. So for the cabinet doors, I was missing the handles to pull it open. So I found these little knobs in my stash and decided to just use those so I can make the doors functioning again. Now the handles are old and I have some of these darker knobs, so to make everything more color I decided to use Dixie Belle's gilding wax in gold to make it all the same color. This stuff is super easy to use. You just wipe it on and you can see the color that it changes. Go back with a cloth later and buff the wax and then it's done. People often ask if I need to protect the wax. Gilding wax after 30 days cures completely and hardens, so it is a finish in its own, so it does not need protection. Now I decide that the handles, making them gold, wasn't enough, and I decided I'm going to add a little bit more gold to the body of the dresser. So I highlight these shell style details, do the entire bottom trim around it, start adding it to the drawers, and then I think I caught gotcha fever and I wasn't able to stop with the gold. Originally, I just wanted a little bit, but the more I added, and then the more I added. I just kept going and going. So I also added it to the trim around the top, and then the front and the top was so stunning. The sides look boring. So I grabbed a damask stencil and I used the gold gilding wax on the side. I use this damask stencil also on the fronts of the drawers that are hidden by the cabinet doors. And I went absolutely nuts with the gold, but I think it just made it all come together. Here's a quick reminder of our beginner orange oak piece, and I hope those of you that did not want me to paint this piece, I hope that I changed your mind, because here is our after. I absolutely love this piece. The Norwegian blue paint color with the black powder glaze that just took this piece to the next level with the gold highlights came together to make a perfect, and it seems like it's a piece that would like be in a royal house. It is absolutely stunning and gorgeous. Also, this piece sold within 30 minutes of being posted, and to date is the highest price I have received on a piece. That is all I have for you guys today. Until next time.